I used to believe I understood death, not in a philosophical way, not in a religious way, in a practical way. For 12 years, I worked as a paramedic. Death was part of my job description. I didn't fear it. I didn't romanticize it. I treated it like weather. Something that happens, something you prepare for, but never control. My name is Daniel. People called me when their world was falling apart. Car crashes, heart attacks, overdoses in bathrooms and parking lots. I was the one who arrived after the screaming started. After a while, something changes inside you. You stop seeing faces, you start seeing patterns. You learn how long the human body can survive without oxygen. You learn how quickly panic spreads through a room. You learn which cries mean hope and which ones don't. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop asking questions that don't have immediate answers. God, meaning, what comes after? Those weren't useful on an emergency call, so I put them away. That night I was tired, not physically, emotionally. It had been one of those shifts where nothing dramatic happens, but everything feels heavy anyway. Too many calls, too many broken lives that didn't fit neatly into a report. I remember sitting in the ambulance, staring at my hands, thinking about how strange it was that I could save strangers, but barely recognise myself anymore. I wasn't angry, I wasn't depressed, I was numb. Then the radio crackled, multi-vehicle collision, highway, possible fatalities. Those words always cut through the fog. We moved fast, training takes over, muscle memory, checklists. When we arrived, the scene looked unreal. Cars twisted in ways they weren't meant to twist. Glass scattered across the asphalt like ice. That smell, fuel and burnt rubber, you never forget it. Sirens screamed from every direction. People were yelling. Someone was crying uncontrollably. Someone else was standing perfectly still, staring at nothing. I stepped out of the ambulance and grabbed my gear, and that's when something felt wrong, not dangerous, not painful, just wrong, like the world was half a second out of sync. I took one step forward, and then nothing. No impact, no pain, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't belong in the physical world. For a moment I thought I had blacked out, but then I noticed something that made no sense. I wasn't lying on the ground. I was above it, watching. I could see my body, my partner shouting my name, hands pressing hard against my chest. I should have felt panic. I didn't. What I felt instead terrified me more than fear ever could. I felt calm, complete calm, and that was the moment I realised whatever was happening to me was not an accident. The strangest thing wasn't what I saw, it was what I didn't feel. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel surprised. I was hovering above the scene, watching my own body being worked on like a problem that needed solving. My partner's voice sounded distant, urgent but far away. "Daniel, stay with me." I remember thinking, that's strange, I already feel like I'm not there. The sounds around me began to change. Sirens faded first, then shouting, then even the cold night air seemed to disappear. What remained was a quiet so deep it felt intentional. I became aware of movement, not walking, not floating, something else. It was as if I was being drawn backward, away from the scene, while my attention stayed fixed on my body below. And then slowly the connection loosened. I watched my body grow smaller, not physically, emotionally, like watching a place you used to live in, knowing you will never return the same way. That was the moment I understood something terrifying. Whatever was happening to me was not temporary. I tried to speak, nothing happened. I tried to move my hands. I didn't have hands, at least not the kind I used to. Instead I felt Awareness, pure awareness. I knew where I was without seeing. I understood without thinking. Time didn't move forward, it unfolded. Memories surfaced, not randomly, not chaotically, specific moments, small moments, times I chose silence when I should have spoken, times I spoke when I should have listened. Not dramatic sins, not crimes, just quiet decisions that shaped who I became. And with each memory came understanding. Not judgment, understanding. That's when the calm deepened. And that calm scared me, because I realized something I'd never considered before. If this was death, why did it feel more real than life? Then the darkness around me began to change. It wasn't black, it was depth. Like standing at the edge of something vast, something that had always existed and was only now revealing itself. I sensed movement again, this time forward, drawn, not forced, invited. And as I moved, a thought entered my awareness, clear and unmistakable. You cannot take your body with you. That's when it hit me. Every identity I had built, every title, every achievement, paramedic, protector, the one who saves others, none of it mattered here. For the first time in my existence, I was not what I did. I was simply what I was. And standing there, without a body, without a role, without control, I realized how much of my life had been spent avoiding this moment, the moment where there is nothing left to hide behind. Ahead of me, something began to glow, not suddenly, not dramatically, softly, like dawn breaking through fog. And before I could understand what or who it was, a presence surrounded me, not seen, felt. And I knew without being told that I was about to encounter something that would change everything I believed about life and about death. The light didn't appear all at once. It wasn't like a switch being flipped. It grew, slowly, quietly, as if it had been there the entire time, waiting for me to notice. At first, it was just a sense of warmth, not physical heat, something deeper, like recognition. The darkness around me didn't vanish, it receded. And the more it receded, the more I realized something unsettling. The light wasn't in front of me, it was aware of me. That's when I felt it. Not fear, not excitement, exposure. The kind you feel when someone sees you exactly as you are. Without effort, without explanation. I didn't need to speak. Every thought I had ever hidden, every intention behind every action was suddenly transparent. And yet, there was no accusation, no condemnation, only truth. I became aware of memories again, but this time they weren't scenes. They were weights. I could feel which moments in my life carried substance and which ones were empty. Acts that came from love felt solid, heavy in a good way. Acts that came from ego felt thin, hollow. It shocked me how much of my life fell into that second category. I had done good things, but I'd often done them for the wrong reasons, to feel useful, to feel important, to avoid looking too closely at myself. The light didn't point this out. It didn't need to. I understood, and that understanding hurt more than any judgment ever could. I wanted to turn away, not because the light was painful, but because it was honest, and honesty strips you bare. Then something unexpected happened. The light didn't move closer. It welcomed me, not with words, with permission. A sense that I was allowed to approach exactly as I was. No defenses, no roles, no excuses. As I moved toward it, I felt something loosen inside me, a tension I didn't know I carried. Years of holding myself together, years of staying strong, years of believing that control was the same thing as peace. None of that was needed here. The closer I came, the more I felt known. Not as a paramedic, not as a helper, as a soul. And in that moment, a realization struck me with absolute clarity. This light wasn't reacting to what I had done, it was responding to who I had become. That terrified me, because becoming is something you can't fake. The light pulsed gently, and with it came understanding. Life wasn't measured in years, or achievements, or even actions. It was measured in alignment, in whether who you are on the inside matches the truth you were created to live. I had never thought of life that way. I had treated it like a series of problems to solve, standing there, exposed, understood, and still accepted. I realized how little I had actually lived, and then for the first time since leaving my body, I felt something like anticipation. Not fear, not curiosity, expectation, because I sensed that the presence behind the light was about to reveal itself, and whatever came next would leave no part of me unchanged. The moment he spoke, everything else fell silent, not because the world disappeared, but because nothing else mattered anymore. Daniel, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. The sound of my name didn't reach me through ears, it reached me through memory. Every version of myself I had ever been recognized that voice at the same time. And I knew. I didn't guess. I didn't assume. I knew exactly who was standing before me. Jesus. Not the figure from paintings, not the softened image I'd seen in churches. He was real in a way I had never experienced anything before. Solid, present, unavoidable, and yet gentle. The light that had surrounded me now made sense. It wasn't a place, it was him. I wanted to speak. I wanted to ask questions. 1,000 of them. But the moment I tried, I realized something strange. He already knew. Not just what I was about to say, but why I wanted to say it. That awareness should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, it felt relieving. Like finally being understood without having to explain myself. He looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. And when he did, I felt something collapse inside. Every defense I had built, every justification, every quiet excuse I had used to explain why I lived the way I did. They didn't shatter dramatically. They simply became unnecessary. Daniel, he said again, you have spent your life saving bodies. I felt no pride hearing that, no validation, only clarity. And yet, he continued, you have avoided your own. That sentence struck deeper than anything else I had experienced so far, because it was true. I had stayed busy, useful, needed, helping others gave me purpose, but it also gave me cover. As long as someone else was bleeding, I didn't have to look at my own wounds. Jesus didn't accuse me. He didn't need to. Truth does its own work. He showed me moments from my life, not as scenes, but as patterns. Times I chose competence over connection. Times I chose control over surrender. I saw how often I helped others while keeping myself emotionally distant. Not because I didn't care, but because caring fully felt dangerous. And then he said something I wasn't prepared for. You learned how to stop pain, but you never learned how to receive love. That broke me, not emotionally, existentially, because I realized how much of my life had been built around function instead of relationship. I asked him, without words, why he was showing me this. His response wasn't immediate, and that pause mattered. Then he answered. Because before January 22nd, he said, many will discover that the lives they built cannot carry them forward. The weight of that statement settled slowly. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't warning for shock. He was explaining reality. People will try to bring their titles with them, he continued, their identities, their distractions, but only what is real will remain. I understood then. This wasn't just about me. I had been shown this so I could tell others what mattered before they reached this point themselves. Jesus looked at me again, and this time his gaze felt purposeful. "You still have time," he said, "but many do not realize how little remains." And in that moment, I sensed that what he was about to show me next would not be personal. It would be collective. Something unfolding, something already in motion, and something that would begin sooner than anyone expected. Jesus didn't show me disasters. There were no explosions, no collapsing cities, no fire falling from the sky. That surprised me. Instead, he showed me something far more unsettling. Ordinary life, people waking up, going to work, scrolling through their phones, laughing, arguing, making plans for the future. Everything looked normal. And that was the problem. Before January 22nd, Jesus said, the world will not change on the outside. He let that settle. But many things will change on the inside. As he spoke, I began to feel what he meant. A subtle pressure, not panic, not fear. Awareness, like a question forming in the background of people's minds, even if they didn't have words for it. Many will feel restless, he continued. They will sense that something is unfinished. I saw people lying awake at night, staring at ceilings, refreshing screens, trying to distract themselves from a feeling they couldn't name. They will try to numb it, Jesus said, with noise, with entertainment, with anger, but the feeling will return. I understood then, this wasn't about events, it was about exposure. Before January 22nd, what people have been avoiding will begin to surface. Not dramatically, quietly. Conversations they've been postponing, forgiveness they've delayed, truths they've buried under productivity and routine. Jesus showed me families sitting in the same room, physically close, but emotionally distant. Friends drifting apart without knowing why. People realizing suddenly and uncomfortably that the lives they built no longer feel aligned with who they are becoming. This is the window, Jesus said. Not a date circled on a calendar, not a countdown, a window of clarity. A moment when hearts are still soft enough to change, he explained. I asked him, again without words, why this window mattered. His response was simple. Because after it closes, he said, clarity becomes harder. Not impossible, harder. People will still be able to choose, still be able to turn, but the cost will feel heavier, the resistance stronger, the distractions louder. Before January 22nd, many will feel an invitation they don't recognize as one, a pull toward honesty, toward reconciliation, toward letting go of things that no longer fit. Some will listen, others will ignore it and move on, not because they are evil, but because ignoring inner truth is easier than facing it. Jesus looked at me again. This is not about fear, he said. It is about alignment. He showed me two kinds of people, both living normal lives. One group responding to the discomfort by slowing down, by reflecting, by choosing humility over certainty. The other group responding by doubling down, working harder, arguing louder, clinging tighter to identities that feel safe. Both groups looked the same on the outside, but inwardly they were moving in opposite directions. This separation, Jesus said quietly, does not happen between people. It happens within them. That was when I realized something deeply unsettling. Most people would miss this moment entirely. Not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't look urgent. No alarms, no sirens, just a quiet invitation to become honest before honesty becomes unavoidable. Jesus' voice softened. I am giving time, he said. Not to frighten, but to invite. And then he said something I hadn't expected. "You were shown this," he told me, "because you understand urgency, because you know what happens when people wait too long to respond." The weight of that responsibility settled over me. I realized then that what came next would not be about explanation. It would be about choice, mine and everyone else's. Jesus didn't describe the future in terms of events. He described it in terms of reactions. How people respond, he said, will reveal far more than what happens. As he spoke, I saw 3 distinct patterns begin to form. Not categories of people, but ways of responding. The first response felt familiar: avoidance. I saw people sense the discomfort rising inside them, that quiet unrest, that feeling that something isn't aligned, and immediately push it away. They stayed busy, filled every moment with noise, worked longer hours, scrolled longer nights, not because they were lazy, but because stillness felt threatening. Jesus said, "Many will mistake distraction for peace." I saw how quickly discomfort turned into irritation, small frustrations becoming anger, minor disagreements turning into division, not because people hated each other, but because unresolved inattention looks for somewhere to go. This response will feel normal, Jesus said, even justified. And that's what made it dangerous, because avoidance doesn't make truth disappear. It only delays the moment of confrontation. The second response looked more respectable: control. These were people who sensed the same inner pressure, but responded by tightening their grip. They reorganized their lives, doubled down on beliefs, clung harder to labels and identities that had once served them well. They wanted certainty, clear answers, defined sides. Jesus showed me how easily certainty becomes armor, protective at first, restrictive over time. These people are not wrong for wanting stability, he said. But when control replaces trust, growth stops. I saw relationships strained, not by disagreement, but by rigidity. People choosing to be right instead of choosing to be honest. And then he showed me the third response. It was quieter, harder to notice, surrender, not dramatic, not passive, intentional. These were people who felt the discomfort and didn't rush to escape it. They slowed down, asked difficult questions, listened to themselves and to others. They didn't have all the answers, and they were finally okay with that. Jesus said, "These are the ones who will feel the weight of this season, but also its grace." I saw them forgive things they had carried for years, admit truths they had avoided, release identities that no longer fit, not because they were forced to, but because holding on had become heavier than letting go. What struck me most was how similar all 3 groups looked on the outside. Same routines, same responsibilities, same daily lives, no visible dividing line. The separation Jesus spoke of was invisible to everyone except the one experiencing it. This is why many will say nothing has changed, he told me, and yet everything will be different. I realized then that the window he described was not about time running out, it was about resistance increasing. Avoidance becomes habit, control becomes rigidity, and surrender. Surrender becomes harder the longer it's delayed. Jesus looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't felt before. "Tell them this," he said. "The response they choose will quietly shape the direction of their lives long before they realize it." I understood. This wasn't about predicting the future. It was about revealing the present. And in that moment, I felt the question turn toward me. How would I respond? The moment the question turned toward me, everything else faded. Not the light, not his presence, but the sense that this experience was about others, It wasn't anymore. It was about me. Jesus didn't accuse, he didn't warn. He asked. Daniel, he said, what are you holding on to that you already know you cannot carry forward? The question didn't arrive as sound. It arrived as recognition. And instantly I knew the answer. Not one thing, many. I saw how much of my identity had been built around being needed, around being competent, around being the one who steps in when things fall apart. Those things looked noble, but beneath them was fear. Fear of slowing down, fear of being seen without usefulness as armor, fear of sitting still long enough to face what I had avoided. I realized how often I had chosen function over presence, how easily I helped others while remaining distant myself. Not because I didn't care, but because caring fully meant risk, and risk meant loss of control. Jesus didn't rush me. He let me see it, layer by layer, the moments I avoided difficult conversations, the relationships I kept at a safe distance, the way I hid behind responsibility instead of vulnerability. Then he asked again, not louder, not harsher. Are you willing to live without the shields you built to survive? That question shook me, because I understood something clearly for the first time. The shields that once protected me were now preventing me from living. I wanted to answer quickly, yes, of course. But honesty slowed me down, because surrender isn't theoretical, it costs something. I felt the weight of choice press in, not from him, but from the truth itself. This wasn't about perfection or sudden transformation. It was about willingness, about loosening my grip, about trusting that who I am beneath the roles is enough to be loved. Jesus showed me two possible paths, not futures, directions. One path was familiar, busy, productive, respected, but increasingly hollow. The other path looked uncertain, slower, less impressive, but honest, connected, alive. He didn't tell me which one to choose. He waited, and that waiting mattered, because love that forces isn't love. In that stillness, I felt something break open inside me, not dramatically, quietly. I didn't make a promise. I didn't declare devotion. I released something smaller and heavier. Resistance. I allowed myself to be seen without conditions. And in that moment, something changed. Not around me, within me. Jesus nodded, not in approval, but in recognition. You are not being asked to become someone else, he said. You are being asked to stop pretending. That was when I understood why this experience couldn't stay with me, why I couldn't remain there. Because insight without action becomes avoidance in a different form. I sensed the transition before it happened, a gentle pull, a shift in gravity, and with it came a knowing. I was going back, but I would not return unchanged. The return didn't happen suddenly. There was no violent pull, no falling sensation, just a shift, like waking up from a dream you don't want to leave, knowing that once you do, nothing will feel the same. The light began to soften, not fade, withdraw. Jesus didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been understood. The last thing I felt before the transition was not urgency. It was trust. Then weight returned, pressure, pain, air burning my lungs as it forced its way in. I heard voices again, loud, frantic, close. We've got a pulse. My body jerked, my chest burned, and suddenly I was back. The ceiling lights were too bright. The world felt heavy, crude, as if I had been moved from a quiet, meaningful place into something loud and unfinished. Recovery took time, not just physically, internally. I went back to work eventually, back to routines, back to normal life. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer moved through the world the same way. The things that once felt urgent now felt loud. The things I once ignored now demanded attention. I found myself slowing down, listening more, talking less. I began noticing moments I would have rushed past before, a look in someone's eyes, a pause in a conversation, an opportunity to be present instead of productive. I didn't become perfect. I still struggle. I still avoid sometimes, but I no longer pretend I don't know what I'm doing. That awareness stays with you, and so does the responsibility. I understand now why I was shown what I was shown, not to predict dates, not to frighten people, but to remind them of something simple and uncomfortable. Life is not measured by what you accomplish, and it's measured by what you become when no one is watching. Before January 22nd, and really, before any moment you choose to stop postponing, there is a window, a quiet one. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It simply asks whether you are willing to be honest before honesty is forced upon you. If you're listening to this and feel unsettled, that's not a threat. It's an invitation to slow down, to soften, to let go of what no longer fits. I can't tell you what choice to make. No one can. But I can tell you this: you don't have to wait for everything to fall apart to start living truthfully. You don't have to lose your life to find it. You still have time. The question is, what will you do with it?